Hello everybody, it's Chibi, and today I'm going to be doing an anime review on Hunter x Hunter The Last Mission anime movie review. Now, this movie, I want to be straight out honest with all of you, okay? This movie is good. I had a lot of hype. I enjoyed the movie for the most part. But I personally believe after watching the movie, it's not canon. I don't believe the movie is canon to the real manga or anime. For instance, I don't believe this movie can really be fit into the real story. But if I had to say where the timeline of this movie takes place, it's between the part where after Gon meets Kite for the first time and right after soon as Kite dies, where Gon still thinks he's alive. And so, that's where I think the movie takes place, honestly. But if you look at it, it really fills out of place the way the movie pans out with the terms of the timeline of the Chimera Ant arc. And so, it's really weird. And so that's why I'm really saying that it most likely is not canon. Now, the movie overall was freaking artistically stunning. I love the animation and the art style. It looked really good in this movie. And the film really held up. I mean, I believe Madhouse was the studio that handled this movie. And it was a really good movie for the most part. It was. But when it comes into the terms of some of the parts of this movie, it felt like the animation teams switched. For instance, there was a couple moments in this movie, like right at the beginning, the animation looked good, but the character designs were a little bit different. But you go into the middle section to the last part of this movie, you notice the animation of the characters' faces and everything change, and it looks really weird. And then it fixes up, like, right at the end. So, I personally believe, like, there's a bunch of different anime squads or groups working on this movie. So I truly believe that most likely it's a little bit stunning and weird how you'll notice how the animation changes, but it's not nothing that really degrades the overall quality of the movie. That's not something I complain about. The music. If there is one thing, if you could say you hate this movie, you could say you hate Hunter x Hunter, okay? You could say you hate the characters, but you cannot deny the fucking godlike music of this movie. The music alone is so godlike. Oh my god. I mean, this movie came out in December, if I'm correct, and it took a while for it to get subbed. And so, clearly, the songs and soundtracks in this movie were used in the Chimera Ant arc. So, we have this movie to thank for those epic, badass soundtracks we saw in the Chimera Ant arc. So, we have this to thank. So, we can at least bow down before this movie and say, thank you so much for these fucking epic soundtracks, because that soundtrack is so freaking good. I mean, seriously, that gets my skin crawling when I hear some of that soundtracks. It makes me just want to buy the soundtrack instantly. Now, I want to talk about the script. The script of this movie, personally, I don't think it was written by Togashi, because Togashi, as I've said many times in my reviews, the way he goes about writing his story, it doesn't feel like a shonen sometimes. It feels like it goes into seinen or something completely darker. It just goes into a dark side of shonen. And personally, I don't believe this movie was written by Togashi. Maybe supervised, but I don't personally believe that this movie is written by him, because there was a couple elements in the movie I know for a fact contradicts what Togashi would do. For instance, at the end of this movie, the way the final villain or the final boss got finished felt very shonen-ish. Like, it was just friendship overcame, and, you know, just random power-ups out of nowhere. He had this honor, this hatred go inside of Gon with his nin. He was able to use both, and he took down the main villain in a punch. And personally, it felt very anticlimactic for something it felt very anticlimactic for what I'm used to with Hunter x Hunter, because if we all know Hunter x Hunter, and if you've been sticking with it for a while, it'll feel a little bit unsettling or lackluster compared to some of the things we have seen recently. I'm not saying the movie was bad. I'm just saying, in terms of the level of writing and the different plot twists and the stuff like that with the build-up, I personally believe the movie didn't hold up for that. But it was an enjoyable watch. If you factor in the enjoyment value, I enjoyed the movie all around. Getting to see these characters again, all these different characters haven't even appeared for a while, even in the Chimera Ant arc, getting to see them once again, really brought up those good freaking memories. But there was one cameo I noticed in this movie that shocked me. Paristan. Now, the rat, the Zodiac rat, if you don't know who he is, was shown in this movie. Now, here's the big thing that really weirds me out, okay? As you all know by now, I'm not a manga reader. And personally, this movie really spoils a lot. Like, a lot. I personally don't believe you should watch this movie until after you watch the Chimera Ant arc, because it spoils you on Netero's nin abilities, it spoils Paristan and what he's like the vice chairman, it spoils certain elements that happen with Gon and Pito. It actually kind of resembles the entire Chimera Ant arc. Some of these scenes in this movie really remind me of the Chimera Ant arc. Like, the main villain, he looks like Meryl's kind of like, but a less developed villain. And then you see his, like, 3 guards in one section of this movie, and it reminds me of the Royal Guard that Meryl had. So, personally, there was a lot of references to the Chimera Ant arc, and if you look back, this movie came out technically before the big battle in the palace of the Chimera Ant arc, since it came out in December, and so I personally believe that the movie was used to build up hype for the Chimera Ant arc. It really was. But personally, I feel like it would have degraded the overall quality of the Hunter x Hunter series if you would have watched the movie first. And so, like I said, I would not recommend watching this movie. If you're new to Hunter x Hunter, I wouldn't recommend watching it before finishing that arc. Now, I do want to say, though, for the most part, I like the way they handled the villains. Like, I mean, even though they were kind of semi-generic, I mean, there was standard shonen villains, they were really cool. I like the art design of them. One of them reminded me of Sephiroth, and at the exact same time, I love the way they used On. I think I'm saying that right. It's the hatred, Nin, the dark side of Nin. It's called On. And I like the way that was handled. For one thing, it brought up a very interesting theory. Now, let's say Togashi was supervising this project, okay? Now, the entire, like, concept of this that was brought up in this movie kind of reminds me of some of the things that Netero said in the Chimera Ant arc. For instance, in the Chimera Ant arc, he says, like, do not underestimate the endless malice to humanity. Most likely I didn't say the full line correctly, but still, you get the point. And the malice can technically be described as hatred, and so if you look at, you know, hatred being this honor, this ability that's kind of like anti-Nin, it kind of reminds me of what happened to Gon in the Chimera Ant arc. So, I wonder if, you know, Togashi will implement this, like, dark Nin, or, you know, On, or hatred, whatever name you want to specifically give this. I wonder if Togashi will eventually implement some form of this in the future, because in the movie, I noticed, like, there was a dark aurora on the characters when they used it, and it reminded me a lot of when Gon transformed into his adult version of himself, and so I don't know if anyone else realized the correlation between those two scenes. It may have just been a reference, but I personally believe it might have something more of importance down the road. Now, I don't feel like the development also of the main villain was covered properly. I don't. Like, I mean, they really didn't have any development for the main villain. I mean, right at the beginning, we get to see a little bit of fight when Netero was young, and then you see this little bit of build-up going on here. You see that he has endless hatred for Netero, and then at the end, we get to see a little bit of their backstory, which it felt rather too late to add in this character development after, you know, he was already dead. So, I personally believe the villains will not hold up to some of the villains we've seen in Hunter x Hunter's real series, but it was good. No, my overall rating of this movie, honestly, it's enjoyable. If you love Hunter x Hunter, you'll definitely love this movie, but do not go walking into this movie expecting the same badass feel as you got from the Chimera Ant arc or Hunter x Hunter in general. You probably won't get that, but you will enjoy the movie. My biggest complaints I have, honestly, with the movie I really do want to complain about is the way they downplayed Hisoka and Netero in this movie. That's my biggest complaints I have. Like, for instance, Hisoka he was in the movie for half the movie, but he didn't fight. He was just there to be there. And it kind of upset me because, I mean, he kept that entire, like, you know, tendency to say points about a specific person. Like, he said one of the people that were using On, like, 65 points. If we've watched the recent episode of Hunter x Hunter, we know that Hisoka has been putting points to specific people to see how strong they are, and they kept this, you know, entire, I guess, personality in this movie, but at the exact same time, that was their way of justifying him not fighting in the movie, which kind of irks me a little bit, because, I mean, I'm a big Hisoka fan, and seeing him not fight, even though he's in the movie, just felt rather odd, honestly, because, I mean, seeing Netero fight this fucking dude at the end a little bit, that made me fangasm, because getting to see Netero fight again, but I was like, oh my fucking god, this is so fucking good. But to see, you know, how it went down, I was like, oh, that's disappointing, because, I mean, it was Gon that, you know, saved the day and won, so I just wish they would have been, you know, more in the movie, like they played a better part. But overall, good movie. I would recommend it. And I think I'm going to give this movie, overall, I would say 7. I would give it a 7. I would definitely give it a 7 out of 10. It was not a bad movie. So everybody, tell me your thoughts about this movie of Hunter x Hunter. Did you enjoy it? Did you hate it? What's your favorite part about it? I love all of you so much. You be safe. Chibi out.